Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining my podcast. This is Conversations with My Friends in AI, and I'm Claire Longo, your host. I have with me today some amazing friends on the show. I have Amber Roberts and Bianca Depriest. Am I saying your name right, Bianca?
Yeah.
Name. Good. Bianca and Amber, I've known you guys for a while. Really excited to have you on the show today. And what we're going to be talking about is tips and tricks for being a successful woman in tech. So to kick things off, I actually want to do introductions. Amber, maybe we start with you. Give us a little bit of an intro. Tell us about your career path.
Yes, awesome. Thanks, Claire. Thanks for having me on. So Claire and I have been working at Arise together for about 2 years now. And before coming to Arise, I was an AI PM at Splunk. And then before that, I was head of AI at Insight Data Science, which was a fellowship that pretty much trained folks from a variety of different industries, from academia, transition them into machine learning engineers all over the country. And before that, I was an academic. I was an astronomer, and yeah, I saw a lot of astronomers getting this new role as data scientist, and it paid way better, had a good work-life balance. And so yeah, moved to San Francisco and tried that out. Yeah, I think that's pretty much like the main part. Bianca?
Yeah. So I actually, graduated undergrad, like pre-med, getting out of school, the only jobs you're really qualified for is like working in the lab or some entry-level sales role. And so I didn't want to work in a lab. And I fell into an entry-level sales role that was like door to door, just crazy grind. And then from there, I feel like I just moved into the most like complex, one layer after another as far as when it comes to the industry and sales cycle. So found a startup a few years back, my first startup in the mortgage industry, automating income analysis. Then moved to a little bit more complex when it comes to tying together all inventory management, and then fell into AI and machine learning a few years back. I think I was watching Social Dilemma and saw all of the negative implications when it comes to ethical AI. Someone at my old organization reached out and said, "Hey, we're helping Fortune 500 companies with responsible AI." I was like, "What are you talking about? There's no such thing." And so at least from my knowledge of Social Dilemma. And so then I got into that organization, and now I'm here at HPE, helping with the AI at scale software stack that we provide to a bunch of Fortune 500 companies.
Amazing. I love those origin stories. First question I have for you is I want to talk about the challenges of being a woman in tech. There's pros and cons here, of course, and really just hearing from each of you, your perspective. What are some key like stats, some stories you can share? Let's talk about the challenges here.
Yeah, I could take that first. So just quickly pulling up some stats, because obviously we want to talk about the importance of finding solutions and how you can survive and thrive as a woman in tech. But I think it's important to understand the origin of why we even need that guidance. So a couple of I think important stats to share here is right now there's 32% of workers in the tech world are women, which is lower than in 1984 when it was 35%.
No,
yeah.
that's wild.
Another crazy one, percentage of women in tech leadership roles has fallen to 28% in 2023. And then when it comes to, I think of, Claire, your guys' actual organization and a woman-led kind of organization, in 2022, all women startup teams received an all-time low of 1.9%, or 4.5 billion out of 238 billion in venture capital funding. So just kind of laying the ground of, why we're here.
Yeah, that's wild. Those are some really interesting stats there. Amber, love to hear your perspective here as well.
Yeah, and I was just thinking like kind of the differences between academia and industry, and it's not all that different. I will say with tech and companies, there is an emphasis on, everyone wants to work together to achieve like a common goal. And so the team you surround yourself with really matters. And and versus like academia, everyone's a bit more isolated. So that's what really appealed to me. It's just finding that right team. All of my teams that I have joined from Splunk, Insight, Arise have had very strong women already at that company. And I've interviewed at like a lot of companies, I've talked to a lot of teams, and when I ask about, how many, like what's your portion of women, of minorities, like at this company, and if they don't know or don't know where to find that information, I take that a little bit as a red flag, because I don't expect them to say like, oh, it's 50-50, or there are way more women here than there are guys in tech, because I just don't see that, and that's not a really obvious expectation. But an expectation you can have is when I hear, oh, it's about like this percent, but we're going to Grace Hopper, we're going to these conferences, we're going to schools, we're really advocating for more women and minorities to be joining this company. Like, that's what I want to hear. I want to know it's a priority for them. I have heard, the company will remain nameless, but a response that was just very blatantly like, oh, well, I mean, you can't expect the numbers to be even. And that was just the only thing they said. And I was like, okay, well, I will not be, I will be not moving on like with this interview, like the interview process. So that's one thing. Like, you can't expect numbers. Like, Bianca shared some of the numbers. We know that's an issue, but like, it's more how people are feeling about what is currently those numbers and that divide. And if it's a priority of the company to be hiring, not just to say that they have more women, but because they want that variety of opinion. I think, I don't know the stat right off my head, but it was one of like, boards that are mixed with minorities and women, and the success rate of those companies. And it's a lot higher than if you only have one homogeneous kind of class.
Yeah, there's a lot of value in that diversity of thought in a room. You said something really interesting, that response, where you can't expect the numbers to be even. Unfortunately, like when we hear these stats, like they're not even. And I'm really curious to hear from both of you, like, why are we even here? Like, why is that the challenge right now?
When you say why we're even here, like how we got to this spot,
Yeah, like
or
why are
like
there
why
not more
us
women?
specifically, like why I'm here, why Bianca's here.
I know why y'all are here. You guys are amazing. You guys are working hard. But in general, like, why is it the case in tech where we don't have like even representation from different diverse groups? Like, how do we get here in the first place? What's kind of the root cause from your perspectives?
Right. So one root cause I love to speak about, especially because, I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I see certain notions that just can get, ingrained in girls' heads really early on. But essentially, I think it was Reshma. Is that who I'm
Oh,
thinking?
Reshma, yeah.
Yeah, Reshma,
Yeah.
found one of the founders of Girls Who Code, but essentially gave a big talk around, how boys are taught to be brave and girls are taught to be perfect. And so when we talk about how did we get here, I think there's a root level of, boys and girls, and I think it's definitely changing. We have different generations of parents and trying to really break these stigmas. But I do see it. Like, my daughter gets stuck in math and she's like, I can't do it. And she just wants to be perfect. And I'm not saying all little girls are like that, but there is this certain kind of room for failure for men and to be brave. And for females, we feel like we have to be perfect. Even like, I think there's stats out there around, men who will see a job posting and maybe they fill 5 out of 10 of those requirements. But they're still going to apply. And then a woman might, see and she fills 8 out of 10 of those requirements and less inclined because they don't feel like they are qualified. And so I think there's a little bit of a stem there, but I'll definitely let Amber expand on what she thinks.
Yeah. And Bianca, yeah, it's 60%. Like, a woman will see 100%. If they meet 100% will apply at the same rate that if men reach 60% will apply. And yeah, and going back to that quote, like, I've been saying that for pretty much since college, when I noticed a very obvious trend that all the women in my like freshman group that were in STEM, like everyone was getting C's on these weed out courses, these first like physics tests, and the women would be like, I gotta see. So many of them dropped, so many of them switched majors because they like internalized the C to be like that, that's what they're capable of, like that is their level, like they're not smart enough to be like in these courses. And a guy would get a C and be like, oh, that test was crap, like, it wasn't them. Or it's just like, like, yeah, I could study harder, I could work harder. Like, I did not hear hardly any guys say like, oh, I'm just too stupid, that's why I gotta see. I know they're out there. Same way, when I got a C, I'm like, meh, I was like, that wasn't a good test. I could work harder and stuff like that. But I would just see it all the time with the women of, oh, like that C is reflected of my capabilities as a scientist. And so like I can't do this. And so they would switch. Like all the women in my first, there were less women in my like graduating class for like physics and astrophysics, but those women, I know they had like A's. I know they had very strong grades. And they were all skewed towards the top like of the class. And then the men were more kind of like the normalized distribution. Whereas when like women kind of that cutoff distribution, like they leave for different majors. And yeah, so that's definitely how I feel like we've gotten here. Like boys, like it's okay, boys will be boys, like they can make mistakes, like they can make as many mistakes as they want. Women aren't always held to the same standard, and then they just start internalizing it, like you said.
Yeah,
And then oh, go ahead, Claire.
I was just going to say that's fascinating because what it seems like a lot of women have in common that I meet in tech who are really successful is they have this kind of like resilience, like this mindset of like not giving up, which is very hard to kind of foster at a young age, I think.
No, exactly. And I think there's another piece of, the traditional matriarchal type roles of having a family, being in a partnership and what that means, and kind of taking on more of the family responsibility, kind of expected as a woman if you do have a child that you get weird looks from moms at school if you're working because you never pick up your kid, and when you do it's like a shock because the dad's doing it. But in the past there's just been more traditional, I think, gender roles for marriage as well, and for having families. And I think that plays a part as well when it comes to a bit of a gap of women in the workforce, but especially tech.
Yeah. And Bianca, I saw the other day a stat on the companies that are pushing towards back to in-person, just the amount of employees that are going to be lost. And very high majority of those are predicted to be women, as women rather be having a remote role for various reasons. Like, do you see this push for in-office affecting women at a higher level than affecting men's ability to go back to the office?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do. Yeah, I mean, that's what I see as far as flexibility. I'm trying not to name any companies that I know of right now really making a push for people to go back to the office, but I think that was a big portion too of like after COVID and women actually leaving the workforce even more when these pushes started happening to go back in the office.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That kind of brings me to my next question that I wanted to ask about. So, Bianca, I've always seen you as super mom, just an incredible mother and also like very inspiring woman working in tech. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your perspective about being a mother and working in tech and how you really balance that.
Yeah, I think so one thing that was really interesting was newly entering motherhood, because now my kids are, like 5 and 6. But being a woman in tech, starting out having a child, I actually remember being at a company where with my son, we only had 4 weeks and it was PTO time that I had to take. It was like no time for leave. And most people in the US, actually rely on their paychecks to get through life every month. So you can't really afford to have this big gap of pay and get that time to bond with, your child. So those are just like some initial experiences. But what I learned very quickly was, for me as a mom, And my mental sanity actually came from going to work, and I was driven even more to be successful and do well in my role because I had more of a newfound inspiration of my children. So that was really exciting and kind of something that I learned about myself. But then after that, I think like I would not be able to do, I mean, I probably could find a way, but I would not be able to do all the things that I do from a professional perspective if I didn't have an extremely supportive partner. Someone that doesn't mind having to pick up the slack sometimes with laundry and cleaning and staying overnight with the babies. Like, I think my son was 8 weeks old when I had my first travel trip. And there are so many partners or even like dads out there that just aren't willing to stay overnight with their own child without a mother. And so I think that absolutely has been huge. And then getting more into like a stressful, into enterprise roles where you really have to be efficient with your time. I think that's one thing that I've learned is like prioritizing efficiency, and getting better at saying no to people and things that aren't going to actually contribute to more of a revenue generating activity or what's going to set me up for success in my role. So a little bit blabby there, but that's essentially kind of the journey for me.
No, that's fantastic. It makes sense. It sounds like choose your partner wisely, like get someone who's a true partner that's going to be supportive, but then also just like optimizing your time. Like time is so valuable to us these days, and just really knowing how to allocate it and put it where things are important. That's awesome.
And I think like get a therapist. I will say that all day, every day. Like, I mean, everybody should have one, but especially as a woman, as a mom that's balancing all the things, like I'm constantly just feel guilt. So I can absolutely relate with some of the women's stats of, like feeling the need to be perfect to everyone. And I think like having a therapist is actually a huge success in my role. And I would advise that for anybody.
Oh, that's great. I can definitely attest to that. Amber, I want to switch over to you. I know that you are kind of the queen of conferences. You have absolutely kicked ass at some huge conferences, like draw crowds. It's really incredible what you do. I would love to hear a little bit more about your perspective, switching gears a little bit, hear about applying for conferences, how you really approach that, manage that, how you kick ass because you're so amazing there, and really maybe talking about applying for jobs as well. It's really that like application process like conferences and jobs, how you manage that.
Yeah. I think I learned a term for it on TikTok that was like just dream job it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? You get turned down, they say no. And I mean, it's the same way that, you don't get paid what you deserve, you get paid for what you negotiate for. So it's all in your control and in your hands of what you're, what you're going to put yourself out there for. You can't control if you get, those things, but if you, apply for a bunch of conferences, like just apply for a lot of conferences. If you're a minority, if you're a woman, like these conferences love getting more diversity into their conferences. And a lot of times the only one who's doubting like the topic or the ability is you. Like no one else is doubting that. And so I just apply for a lot. We have David, our head of content at Rise, that will just put me out for like a bunch of things. You too, Claire, like we'll put us out, we'll put Aparna out, and just do a lot of applying like on our behalf, because like, why not? If you have any interesting area that you want to speak on, I just recommend doing it. And the more speaking roles you have, the more connections you make, one thing leads to another, you make more friends at these things, and then your speaking skills continue to grow. So same with like, the dream roles. Like I TikTok algorithm has really got me because all these things are so good. But a lot of these women are like, oh, I girl boss too hard, and now I have like this job with a lot of responsibilities. It's like, go for that. Like
I've seen that.
There's no reason, to not apply for they're like, I applied for this job I didn't think I was qualified for, and then I got it. You don't realize well, actually, you do realize how many people aren't that qualified. Like when you meet someone that's like maybe really high up in certain um, well-known companies, and you're like, how did this person get there? And it's, they're just people. And yeah, I often find the people that are most concerned that they're imposters tend to be the best performers and tend to be the most confident people. What is that? Hasher syndrome, something blah blah blah, where like the smartest people don't think they're smart, and the people who think they
Yeah.
smart are, the people who think they are smart aren't as smart as they think. And I think that's kind of like a humbleness that women tend to kind of have a little bit more than men in tech, but that's also just due to the representation. There's so many more men in tech, of course you're going to get a wider range.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Going back to, you were talking about speaking at conferences, you mentioned something really interesting. I think when I first started my career, I was very nervous to public speak. Like I would get up there, I'd be like shaking, nervous. Like I would just like try to talk as fast as I can to get it over with. And now, like 10 years into my career, like I love public speaking. I crave the attention, like give it to me. But I'd love to hear a little bit, because I think your approach has been similar here, how you became a good public speaker, how you approach that.
Yeah. It's practice. A lot of it's practice. And I think once you learn the material, you don't have to practice as much. Like I'll go through slides a little bit beforehand.
Yeah.
Because I think when you're too focused on like what to say, what not to say, making sure everything's pronounced right, that you're not forgetting any points, you lose the audience. And so you don't want to be too practiced, because I like interacting with the audience. I like going off of the things they're asking about. Like I'll kind of switch over my talk if enough people are interested in one thing. And it's just that flow. And if you've gone to a talk that's been kind of boring and you see someone like kind of mess up, you don't think like, oh, like I feel so bad for them. You're like, oh, now I'm paying attention. So a lot of times you can use those moments of like cracking a joke, forgetting something goes wrong in your slides, to then bring people's attention back. And so I think it's also, I got a lot more appreciative of in-person talks after COVID, because I would go to all these talks and conferences and kind of just wait for it to be over so then I could just enjoy myself the rest of the time. But after COVID, I was much more focused on the opportunity and the chance to interact and the chance to like say what I want to say. And I think that that kind of comes from having a few main points that you want focused on, and then nothing else matters. I'm like, if I go to talk and people know how to say arise afterwards, or they know what ML observability is, like if they don't understand slide 26 or like the more in-depth stuff, I'm just trying to get them to walk away with basic understanding and answer questions so they don't feel lost. And I think it's very different from academia in that regard.
Yeah. Bianca, anything from you on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think she's like spot on, hit it spot on with all the top points. I think really like just getting out of your comfort zone, having someone help push you out of your comfort zone as well. Maybe a female ally is always helpful. But the other side too, I just had a point and I'm completely spacing. We'll skip me for now.
We'll circle back on that. It'll come to you.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
It's focus on the outcome. That's what Amber said that really spoke to me, because it's did the audience understand like what was the ultimate outcome? A lot of the times I can see even myself or other women like, okay, we had a successful outcome, but I'm now going to go and look at like, oh, I didn't say this right and I should have mentioned this. But it's like, focus on the outcome. Was it a successful outcome or not? Move it along. You can improve later, but that's what's most important.
Yeah, the main thing, and I've said this, I say this every time. People are like, how do you feel so comfortable on stage? And it's that no one cares. Like no one cares but you. And I see some people just reading straight from note cards. And I know those people like really care and they're really prepared, but that's the worst experience like for the audience. So yeah, if you miss a few things, if you are kind of faking it till you make it, you could just do that. But yeah, no one really cares if you mess up, if you don't mess up, if it went exactly how you expected, if it didn't. People remember your talk based on the experience they had, and if they felt like you were engaging with them and getting, making sure they were following along with you. If you were cracking like a few jokes, I feel like that's the biggest thing. And it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you overestimate your intelligence. Yeah. It all comes back at some
a full circle. Yeah.
full circle.
All right, switching into another topic here. Let's talk about advocating for pay. This is a tough one because I think it affects women and men like equally. It is interesting because it's not something that I personally feel like I've been good at. Like every time I got a new job, I really have not done a lot of negotiations. I was just like, oh my gosh, they're paying me more money, and like more felt like a lot. So I really think that I may have missed some opportunities here not advocating for myself, and that's something that I see affecting both men and women whenever I talk to them. What are some tips specifically for women that you guys would give around this advocating for pay?
Ooh, that's good. And I think I already dropped my biggest quote on that: you don't get paid what you deserve, you get paid for what you negotiate for.
So true.
And a big part of my role at Insight, once the fellows got their role, was negotiation. So I've always been, I've negotiated like all my rents. I negotiate everything. I love the back and forth. And I actually, helping probably over 100 fellows with their negotiations. What I realized is it's not so much men are doing it different than women. Introverts do it a lot different than extroverts. And I'm very extroverted. When you're extroverted, you don't mind like engaging.
You join like negotiation. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the people that, or people whose families like have been taught like we don't talk about money. Families that are a bit more open to talking about money, like what you need to live, what you need to survive. We're much better at it. Some were just like, that's enough money they're offering me. I don't want to like engage anymore. And I'm like, but you're being paid under what's expected. And for that, it's, it's taking a look at your skills, taking a look at market value, and then doing your own calculation. I recommend everyone does their own calculation before even getting the offer of like, I need this much to pay rent, to put into savings, to have this, to live in this area, to go on vacation. And then it was like an exercise I had people do. Like, so come up with that number, and then anything you're getting on top of that is great, and you should feel great about that. So that's kind of like the starting point. But there's been very few times where I see an offer coming back that's more than expected. And you can find people, I recommend like finding some close friends that are also comfortable like talking about salaries, value, worth, because if you're just a datum, like you don't have the data to actually form trends and understand what you should be getting paid in the area. And whenever an offer does come to you, just on the side of negotiation, like if you're given a straight number, you have to look at the requirements for the role, like the level you're going in, things you can negotiate on. You can negotiate on your manager. If the person who interviewed you don't want them to be your manager, you can negotiate on manager. You can negotiate on base. You can negotiate on equity. But you can also negotiate on the level you're coming in at. So if you really want a higher amount, you can go back and like do 1 or 2 more interviews and negotiate for that higher role. Otherwise, you pretty much have to negotiate based on your skills. You can't just ask for more money because you think, they're lowballing you or there's more money there. You have to be like, I actually have these 2 really unique skill sets that are very hard to find in candidates that I think they're not mentioned in the role, but I think that would help me. And that's why I'm asking for like an extra 10 to 15%. I got one person like a company car, extra, like you could get extra vacation days. So there's a lot you can negotiate on, and that depends what matters to you. So like work from home, just know everything's negotiable. Like everything's available for you. You just have to decide before getting that offer, before that dopamine hits, what your priorities are. And then that way, like, you can walk away and feel satisfied.
That's so interesting. You mentioned the dopamine hit, because I think that's been my problem, is like I get the offer. I'm like just so happy I got the offer that I feel like my work is done, but it's not. That should be viewed as just the beginning of the negotiation.
It's the beginning, and that's where you're most excited, but that's also the only time you're going to have the leverage. That's the only time you'll have the
It's so much
power.
harder to negotiate once you're in the role. Bianca.
Yeah, that's actually the point I was going to hit on too. I think that's the perfect, like, okay, you're getting a new role, and how do I negotiate, what I want, which is so important. But a lot of people are leaving companies because they can go and get like 10 to 15% higher pay if they leave their company. And so before you kind of get to that point of like, I want to make more pay, and I think they need to leave my company because there's no way that they would give me, X amount. That's where it comes time to negotiate, whether, it's an annual thing that you're looking at with your company. But really negotiating in the current role you are in, what you kind of need to do. And I know it's equal of men and women that can probably struggle with this, but I think kind of going back to, men maybe being more confident in their skills, and women sometimes can be a little bit less confident. It's like, oh, did I really do that much to deserve this? And so I think one thing that I have definitely done in the past, and will try and do, is kind of like my own brag sheet in a way. So I'm kind of collecting data points of like, pivotal things that I helped with. Did I create like a statement of work for this startup where there's been no process for CSMs? So really like, counting those. It feels weird sometimes, I think, especially as a woman, like it can feel weird to count all of the successes that you're experiencing. But it's really nice for negotiation. It's definitely been something that I've done when I'm negotiating my role. I think the other thing too is just like being realistic. Like obviously get what you're worth, but there's also like sometimes this macroeconomic environment that we're in. And even with my partner, when he was starting at his role, he was like, oh, this is my number. And I was like, you could have gotten like 10,000 higher. Didn't they say that they were willing to do that? And he was like, I don't want to start out. I don't want to be at that very top, because if something is to happen in the company, I'm a recruiter. I don't want to be a high number that they can just cut, quickly if things just don't work out. Once again, macroeconomic startup world. So I think also be reasonable. Yeah, like Amber said, like not just am I getting screwed or lowballed here? But yeah, have a reason behind what you're asking for, and have that market research, and make sure what you're asking for is realistic and is going to set you up in a good position moving forward.
Awesome. I love all that. Let's switch to another question here. I want to talk about setting boundaries in the workplace. This is a fun one. Getting good at saying no. I think this is something that we've all kind of experienced. Maybe Amber, start with you. Tell me a little bit more about like how you approach setting boundaries, how you get good at saying no, making sure you're not taking on too much, but still taking on enough that you can shine.
Yeah. I would say once you start, it gets a little addictive, and so which is good. Like, it's that first kind of no, like I think when you're at a new company, that it becomes difficult to say no for like different projects. And the other thing too is like I don't really ever say no directly. It's more of can't fit that in at this time, would need to fit it in there. Or that if something's being asked to you, but you have a full plate, trying to figure out what you would need to take off or move back in order to replace that. Because that's something I find in tech in particular. Things just are constantly reprioritized, and it's less about just saying no, and more about, like you said, Claire, like the boundary setting. And so it's like, if I have, if I can only juggle like 3 balls, and someone's handing me 2 more, like I have to figure out what 2 to put down, in order to be able to do that. And I think having a great manager that you can talk to, and managing expectations, because I think the last thing to do is say yes to everything and then people are disappointed.
Right.
I think that's probably the worst case scenario. So anytime someone asks you to do something, if it's coming from the top, get alignment before tackling anything. Like I get alignment first so that I understand what's needed and why it's needed. And I think boundary setting is more important than saying no, because everything can be tackled at different times. Things can be consolidated. But yeah, like priorities change, especially like we're in the LLM space, and things are constantly getting reprioritized. So some of the things you wanted to do just may not be as relevant anymore.
Yeah, and to add on to that, so one thing I definitely am seeing is a lot of enterprises where they have some C-suite level that's saying, hey, go figure out how to make large language models valuable in our company. Go find a valuable use case. And one very simple mistake you can make when you kind of take those top-down orders is just not questioning anything. Obviously you don't want to question and be like, well, why are we doing that? Like in a sassy way, obviously, like we're not going to do that. But we can ask, okay, like, you know, what are some of the business cases that you see as most impactful? You know, if you were to think of like a timeline for our company to actually, like, if we wanted to be using large language models, like when would that timeline be? Just start getting some of the facts to understand like how real, how invested is this leader in this initiative? Because the worst thing you can do is, okay, I'm going to go figure this this LLM for the company and get a whole team working on figuring out like, okay, we're going to figure this out. We're going to go try and build business cases. You go back to the C-suite in like a month and they're like, don't even remember, or like, moved on. Yeah. So I think like questioning. And then the other thing I think that's powerful in questioning, you know, if you don't feel comfortable directly saying no to a leader, which is very normal. Like it feels strange if they ask you to do something and you're like, no. What you can do instead is, you know, you can say, hey, like these are my tasks today. Like here's my highest priority, you know, objectives. Curious, like what do you want me to deprioritize to fit this in? So kind of turning it back on them, where it's like, I'm giving you everything that I'm doing without saying like, hey, I'm slammed. Like I have zero idea when I'm supposed to do this and I can't do it. And kind of turning it back on the leader just to help them understand where you're at and get some guidance.
I love that. You can tell we're all from startups. We're like, prioritize that list of things to do. Yep, that is a startup skill set. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
The startup skill set, but also AI and machine learning, like
Yes.
everything's changing. You know, lots of companies want to talk, I think, to all of us right now, as far as us three on this podcast. But so it's very easy to just get into the motion of things and not zoom out and kind of understand like what's the impact, the greater impact to my company, what's the greater impact to me personally as an individual contributor or whatever your role is. I think that zooming out is absolutely a necessity for those setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Yes. Crazy time in AI right now. Yeah.
In startups, like things get reprioritized more, but I feel like in startups, you're building more, like more things are coming out. It's easy, I think, in large companies to work on a project for 2 weeks and then that gets killed, and then work on another thing and then that gets killed, and then you go 6 months and you're like, I don't have very much to show because all these things are getting killed. And so, and I think that comes from having way more people in the company, way more chefs in the kitchen, like more things happening. And I think for that, yeah, like what you're saying, Bianca, like understand the motivation where it's coming from, make sure people are aligned, because a lot of the times the problem is the same, just what they're asked on, like, solve it this way, solve it that way, solve it that way. If you understand the problem and you take the initiative to like craft a solution that works for everyone because you know what they want, that shows a lot of initiative. And that's, I think, how a lot of people get promoted within companies.
Yeah, ownership, even outside of a startup. You're so right. Like those are the top performers, are people that understand the actual problem they're solving, not just the task that was assigned.
Exactly. And that's where it's like, it's your responsibility, because you could easily say like 6 months within a big company, like, I don't have anything to show because you guys kept switching up the projects, but it's like that they're still looking at you and what you were able to contribute. So really understanding that problem, like you guys are saying, is so critical.
Definitely. All right, last tough question here. Assertive versus aggressive. So in tech, there's a ton of like really nice, super supportive, amazing people that I love collaborating with. And once in a while, you find someone who doesn't quite fit that description, someone who is maybe a little bit unkind or maybe a little bit mean. And I'm sure you all have experienced this. I certainly have. It's rare, but unfortunately, it's out there. I think people are pressured by being in this kind of field. It's difficult. Some people crack under pressure. I don't know why we always see these behaviors, but sometimes there's just mean people. As a woman in tech, how do you approach really setting boundaries with these kind of unkind people?
Ooh, Bianca, do you want to go first or?
I guess the first piece that I always try and remember is like, and it's like I am no saint at doing this. It's absolutely like trying to actively work this skill in. But when someone, it might be disrespectful or something of that nature, like coming from a place of empathy first, understanding that everybody's human. There could be something going on in someone's life. There could be something crazy like that they're, trying to face a deadline. We have no idea about it. So I think that's like first and foremost, because sometimes it just could be an out of character moment for people. Or there's also instances where like there might be a certain coworker and they keep doing like really strange things that really aggravate you, and like 6 months down the line you hear about kind of like their childhood, their upbringing, and it being absolutely terrible, and you kind of like put those pieces together and you like wish, and this actually happened to me, like I just wish I had more empathy for him at the beginning. We first started, when I first started forming these opinions. And I mean, I think that's a powerful skill, so you don't take things too personal. And yeah. And then the other piece is it's okay to be assertive as a woman back to aggression. So if someone is speaking to you a certain way that you don't like, even if it's on, a call with a bunch of other colleagues, it's important at that moment. And it's also hard because, emotions come over you and like logic brain kind of, fleets. But it's important to then like stand up for yourself and say something in an assertive, not aggressive, but assertive and factual data point way. So I think that's important as well.
Yeah, I like
Yeah,
that.
I completely agree. And something I have to remind myself, be kind, be empathetic. Oh, did I lose you guys?
Oh, you're back. You're there.
Okay. I was like, either I stunned you guys into silence or okay. Yeah, hopefully the internet keeps up. But yeah, so what I was saying is something that I continuously have to remind myself is to be kind, to be empathetic. Because we're tough ladies, and if someone comes at me like assertively or aggressively, if someone just kind of comes at me, you want to be on the offensive, and either offense or defense, and sometimes you just need not be on the fence and just be kind. And so are you doing okay, like, hey, like, oh, I understand, like, has it been a tough week? Because normally they soften and then they're like, you know what, it actually has been a terrible week. And it's not easy. It's easier to say than to do. Like I still have to remind myself, because like a lot of times I think when things escalate, it's because it's abrupt and you don't expect it, and then it kind of throws you off guard. But if it's someone that you're continuously having to deal with, I think, just understand, like, it's not actually personal against you if you see them acting like this, like that's how they act, and it's kind of like unfortunate. But that has nothing to do with you or like how you're going to handle the situation. But yeah, some people that are a little bit more prickly, like just being kind and continuously like offering support does soften them to you. And it kind of depends. Like some people are nice, but they're not kind. Like they talk the talk, but like when you actually need help or something, they're not there. And then some people aren't nice, but they're incredibly kind. And I think understanding like people is an underrated skill in pretty much every industry. And so like understanding, like Bianca, you're saying, like where they're coming from, like a lot of stuff comes up later on, like they had a lot of difficulty and they were struggling. So understanding that. The other thing though, the thing that's a little bit more difficult are people that are slightly like looking out for themselves or a little bit malicious. And for that, I say like document everything is going to be a key thing. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, just in case, like if they try, if, heat comes out and they're trying to use it as a scapegoat, which doesn't happen often, but it can happen, like document everything. Make sure you have that to fall back on. You could say like, actually, no, I did do this. Remember, like I told you in this email, like, have a conversation on Zoom, email them afterwards, Slack them afterwards, make sure your bases are covered. And I also think this is a great part of working, why a lot of women or maybe just like shyer people prefer working with Zoom, because, you can't be cornered. You can say like, okay, that's all the time I have, like, gotta go, gotta hop. So it is a benefit there if you feel like it's constantly happening in an office, like, and you try a remote job, it's a little bit different there.
Yeah. One last very quick thing I would say to that is, yeah, absolutely. Especially if someone's a little is malicious to you, and you know that it might just be a problem and you're to the point where you're documenting. Don't slack them or put things in writing that they could use against you. I think you should so look out for that. Like you could have one day where you're venting, like just be conscious of those things when we live in this like very digital, let's text everything world.
Yes. Only Slack stuff that will help you.
Yeah.
Very good point, Bianca. Yes.
Yeah.
Document everything, but not certain things.
Yeah. Well, because it's true, like malicious people can kind of, potentially manipulate something you said. You could be venting one day, even though maybe you have a weird experience, but you're on the same team or whatever it may be. It could be in a big group thread and you forget that that person's on there. So just, just be careful when you have that type of person.
Yeah. I gotta spot them. These are really helpful tips. Last question I have for you. So something that I love to see in people is I love to see it when people are just being themselves, like acting in their own authentic energy. And I love it when a company creates an environment where people can just lean into their natural personality, their natural strengths. So as women, I'd love to hear kind of what you feel each of you are bringing unique to the table and how you're kind of leaning into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I can start because there's, one thought when you say like with these companies and creating this environment for other women to succeed. I'll talk about a tiny bit of what I'm trying to replicate here, but there was a woman, her name's Michelle, at a former company I was working at. Shout out because she's like a real life Leslie Knope, if you've ever seen Parks and Rec, like just
amazing.
So transformational, so amazing, so inspiring. But she saw, a bit of a gap of women and leadership and things of that nature. And I was still somewhat, getting my bearings of, my confidence and authenticity within a company. She saw a ton of potential in me. And so she really brought me up, and she was a mentor for men, women, whatever, but she definitely took a special interest in women that saw, she saw these qualities of leadership. And she knew that it's her job. And I think it's the same for us, where I need to create an environment for others to thrive. As I move up in leadership, I want to bring other women with me. And so like one example is just, there was a company all hands and, hundreds of people on it. And a couple of days before, she's like, I want you to give this talk about, ironically, women in the workplace, because I think it was International Women's Month or something of that nature. And I hated that idea. I was like, I want to present to hundreds of people. I don't want to put together this thing, but she pushed me out of my comfort zone and I did it. And it put me in a really good spot to be, seen by leadership where, otherwise I wouldn't have been seen. And so I think people like that, women like that are so important, rounding out this whole long story of that's where I see a lot of responsibility for myself within organizations. I ask, okay, are we interviewing more women? Why aren't there more women on this team? And then when we do land women in roles that are, close to my team, definitely I take some under my wing a bit, and want to help them get to that next place in their career. So I think that's where it's like we really have to emulate, being this leader that brings other women up with us.
Yeah, mentorship, that's so important. Amber, how about you?
Yeah, I love that, Bianca. And yeah, like bringing the other women up with you. I've done interviews for so many companies, and it never ceases to amaze me, like how many women that like are interviewing for the position, and then they interview with me and they're like, oh wow, like you're the first woman I've interviewed with in tech. And
All of
you
a
know,
sudden, oh
just
no.
yeah, and just
Yeah.
making that connection. I like going, like, so I do a lot of conferences. That's kind of my thing. I think the thing that makes me very like uniquely useful to companies is, oh, someone canceled on that event, like put me in there. Like marketing team knows like I could just sub in. I'm like, I need 30 minutes of prep and I'll just go with it. Very flexible in that, but like going to conferences and just seeing, you know, seeing who we were like in undergrad, and just start talking to them. And you know, because like I wasn't always this, I don't know if I've always been this talkative, but like I wasn't always as confident in like my
Yeah.
field, especially starting out. And so just seeing women that, you know, they're like, you know, I'm always dressed comfortable, but they're like in their business suits and, you know, dressed like, you know, just how I feel like I used to dress, and going to my first conferences and thinking like this is a conference, and just chatting them up and telling them about your journey, and like having them like make a connection, because I remember how grateful I was when people would come up to me and strike conversations when it
Yeah.
wasn't my moment. Um, and then just people doing that. And like I think especially at those lunches where, you know, it's almost like high school, like no one knows where to sit, and I'm always inviting them, like I saved you a seat, like I saved you a seat right here, and like you're just moving around the table, you're making people feel comfortable. And I think that that's something that everyone can do that I think is underrated. Like conferences, like anytime I'm giving a talk, like you see someone like coming there, oh, you know, they're a little late, like they're really embarrassed. It's like, oh no, like I got your seat right here, like act like you know them. Because that's a little something that I find goes a long way.
I love that. So it's really like mentorship, setting an example, making people feel included. That's great.
Yeah,
And if
it's
you
like
don't,
not even introducing anyone, although I do that a lot, but just like literally a chair at the table, like just the lunch table,
Yeah.
really makes people like that can make someone's whole day.
and I was gonna just add to that. I think one thing that I love is the importance of community in general. Like besides at your company, you know, I met Claire actually. You know, when we were looking, she was evaluating a software that company that I was working at. But I saw that she was, you know, also in Colorado. I saw this really cool algorithm that she made where it was like comparing wines and quality and price and all of that fun stuff.
Yep. Yep.
Oh my gosh, I want to be friends with this girl. Like, I love it. And so like since then, the friendship's been amazing, but us being involved in MLOps community and you know, like-minded people in the community of Denver, and just having people understand what you're going through and being able to help each other as someone's, you know, company had layoffs, and being able to link each other. So that's not so much woman specific, but I think like finding your community as a woman is really important at work. You know, outside of work, networking, you know, maybe a mom group, but just community is really important.
Definitely. And yeah, I remember when Claire gave her little like about me slide deck at a Rise, and she was like, I like metal music, I like shoes, and I like building high level machine learning and AI teams and algorithms. So I'm like, I want to be friends with Claire.
Like you like slacked me during the
Yeah,
presentation.
I was like,
We're gonna
you
hang
will
out.
be my friend. And and yeah, I mean, and now we're here like together making podcasts, and yeah,
Yeah.
the community of women is so important, and it's always fun.
I love that. Well,
Love about you too is that you both are like unapologetically yourself. You're not scared to, you know, be different, to be a gorgeous woman, Claire, and dress up and like wear high heels, but also kick ass and go lead a team of men that are machine learning engineers. And Amber, like I see you at conferences and you're so confident. And like you said, you bring other people. And I love that authenticity. So also
yeah,
very grateful to be, you know, in a Zoom room with you two.
amazing. You learn so much just from hanging around other people. It's that community. You guys are fantastic. Well, last question I have, we'll end on this one. I'm wondering if you have any book recommendations for the audience, something that people could read to kind of keep going with some of these topics and build that confidence. Oh yeah, Bianca's got it.
So yeah, you don't actually see the label, but it's never split the difference.
Yeah, I know that one.
Absolutely. It's not women specific. It's an old FBI hostage negotiator. But even I pulled, questioning for how should I prioritize my day, like asking your leader that question. Like I think that came from this book. Like just a lot of tips of how humans react from a scientific perspective and how you can, I guess, maneuver and label emotions and do things that are going to be impactful as in sales, in negotiating your income as a parent. So I love this book.
I love it. I've definitely read that one. It's on the list. Amber, what you got?
All right, I have The Only Woman in the Room, Why Science is Still an All Boys Club.
I haven't seen that one before.
Great novel, Eileen Pollock. She was one of the first graduates in one of the first women like graduates at Yale for, I forget the exact STEM major. I think it was physics, and like her experience and kind of what we're talking about with the one question of like why we got here and like the kind of systemic sexism that still exists in a lot of institutions. And then this one, oh, this was so good. Invisible Women. Caroline Perez. This is data bias in a world designed for men, and this was fantastic. It kind of makes you mad at some parts, so you might need to put it down and come back to it. But it's like the data gaps, and anyone that's a woman in tech that understands data fully understands why like certain data here, why the medical field for women is underdeveloped compared to men, and just that was a very eye-opening book.
Fantastic. I wonder if our next episode should be like a book reading or like book review or
Ooh,
something. We could go so deep into that.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Definitely gonna get that book on my Kindle like immediately, Amber, because I'm already like getting mad thinking about like women's healthcare, especially like I think maternity like death rates in the US versus other countries. So
yeah.
If you want to like channel your feminine rage, I recommend Invisible Women.
Really get pumped for the day.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you both. I know we're just about at time here, and you guys are both probably going to go off on your way to go put LLMs in production or whatever you're doing these days. So it's fantastic to both have you both on. Thank you for sharing your perspective, and hope you guys have a good day.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Bianca.
Claire.